Who really decides the fate of a nation? The people who vote? Or the hands that quietly own the land beneath their feet? What if a democracy didn't fall to tanks or armies, but to whispers, radio static, and a piece of fruit? Tonight, we enter a story buried on purpose. A story that smells of rain-soaked jungle, inked contracts, and fear moving faster than truth. I'm Dr. Aiken. Welcome to Dr. Aiken Archives, a channel dedicated to uncovering the hidden mechanisms of history. The documents, decisions, and deceptions that reshaped the world. If you're drawn to stories that powerful interests tried to erase, subscribe now and step with me into the archive. Picture this. Night in Central America, 1954. The air is thick, humid, alive with insects and rumors. I'm standing in the shadow of a radio tower, its metal frame cutting into the moonlight, broadcasting voices that aren't real, yet will topple a real government. This is the forgotten twin of Operation TPAJX, and it begins here. Guatemala in the early 20th century was a nation caught between feudalism and possibility. Vast plantations stretched to the horizon, owned by a few, worked by many, and protected by law written far away. A handful of families, and foreign corporations, controlled the ports, the railroads, even the mail. In the National Archives, you can still find early land registries showing entire provinces signed over in a single stroke of a pen. One American company, whose internal reports survive in congressional records, owned more arable land than hundreds of thousands of Guatemalans combined. Then came 1944. A popular uprising forced out a dictator, and for the first time in generations, elections meant something. By 1951, a quiet, methodical former army officer became president. His vision was not revolution, but reform. Land unused would be redistributed. Peasants would farm, vote, and pay taxes. In a dusty government report from that year, the goal is stated plainly: to end semi-feudal dependency and build a modern capitalist democracy. This is the presidential office, where land reform was signed into law. Decree 900, a policy grounded in census data, agricultural surveys, and legal codes borrowed from the United States itself. Compensation would be paid. Everything documented. Everything lawful. But legality didn't matter. In Washington, boardrooms and briefing rooms merged. Memos from the period, some declassified decades later, reveal how land reform was reframed as a communist threat. Publicly, officials spoke of Soviet infiltration. Privately, correspondence between corporate lawyers and policymakers tells a different story. Fear of precedent. Fear that profits declared too low for tax purposes would now be used against them. The operation that followed was not a war. It was theater. Here in the jungle, small rebel force crossed the border, poorly armed, outnumbered, and militarily insignificant. But their strength was never in bullets. It was in sound. CIA manuals from the time describe psychological pressure as the primary weapon. Radio broadcasts announced victories that never happened. Leaflets fell from planes that barely flew. A fake rebel station reported advancing columns, defections, collapse. Inside the capital, panic spread faster than facts. I'm standing on a dimly lit street set, rain streaking the pavement, as newspapers roll off presses. Editors, guided by rumor and fear, print headlines echoing the broadcasts. The army hesitates. Commanders wait for orders that never come. In his diary, preserved in fragments, the president writes of isolation. Allies vanish. Foreign diplomats fall silent. A U.S. State Department cable from June 1954 notes, almost casually, that pressure is achieving desired psychological effect. No invasion was needed. The illusion was enough. When the president resigned, he did so believing thousands were about to die. He went into exile. The reforms died with him.
I'm back in the palace. The new regime moved fast. Decrees repealed, land returned, union leaders arrested. In a military communique from weeks later, dissent is equated with treason. Lists begin to form. Names, villages. What followed was not stability, but silence enforced by terror. Over the next 4 decades, Guatemala descended into cycles of coups and civil war. Truth Commission reports, compiled years later from survivor testimony and army documents, estimate more than 200,000 dead or disappeared. Indigenous communities were erased from maps. Entire regions burned. This is where history's consequences become unavoidable. The coup succeeded. Corporate interests were protected. But the cost was generational trauma, mass death, and a nation taught that democracy could be undone overnight. This was not an accident. It was a model. Iran had oil. Guatemala had land. The lesson learned was devastatingly simple. You don't need to conquer a country if you can convince it to surrender to fear. So when we ask why this story matters, the answer isn't historical. It's present. Because the methods pioneered here never vanished. They evolved. I'm Dr. Aiken, and